and ain't no wannabes here. With some not so nice advice for your writing career. To be clear, no punches will be pulled, but the punch may be spiked. How they like before they get on the mic. To my left, we got the mighty Mer Lafferty. And if I piss her off, believe me, she'll come after me. And her co-host, Matt Evan Wallace, on the right. Yes, she may be half as hype as she can take him in a fight. So settle in, folks, buckle in and boot up. Time to meddle in a way to make you writer shut up. It's hard work, but the perk is that it's fun and exciting. Facebook will still be there when you're done writing. Ditch Diggers! Ditch Diggers!
Coming to you live from Jeff Goldblum's Seattle-based CPAP Emporium, it is the Ditch Diggers with Mer Lafferty and Matt Wallace, and special returning guest star.
You said it right both times.
Okay.
Repeating yourself for no reason.
Elsa shouldn't have said Henry. Did I say your name right?
You did.
Woo-hoo! Hugo-nominated editor, writer, and disability activist. Elsa, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me. I love coming and hanging out with you guys on the internet.
Yay! But first, how are things going, Matt?
They're going good. I'm endlessly amused that we actually went with that for where we're coming from for the show, because no one's going to understand any of those references.
Well, you got to explain it. No, explain it.
Well, I really feel like we just said a bunch of nouns, honestly, before the show, and we're like, we all put them together. No, well, Elsa is in Seattle. I've recently started using a CPAP machine for my severe sleep apnea. And Jeff Goldblum is Jeff Goldblum.
Yes.
So, honestly, it's easier to explain than I thought it would be.
It's not that complicated.
No, it really wasn't. You know what? I was projecting onto it. I realized it now. They were my own issues that I need to deal with.
There we go.
But other than that, I'm good. Or how are you?
I can give you some editorial advice on that one. Just trust the audience to get it.
There we go.
That's why you're a Hugo-nominated editor, also, right there. That kind of insight.
I'm doing okay. I am back from New York Comic Con, where I went last week, and had a great time. Got to sign a couple of copies of Solo, and got to draw on a bunch of Solo posters, which was fun. I started putting word bubbles in all the characters, and you know, my version of their dialogue.
Nice. So and when you say Solo, we should make it clear you were doing Solo-related things to your novelization, your Star Wars novelization.
Yes.
You weren't doing them alone. That's not
sorry. That's the hard part with that novel. Solo, a Star Wars story, the novelization of the movie, which I wrote.
Which you did write.
Yes.
Well, that's really cool. So New York Comic Con was good?
Yeah, it was. You know, it's like I've heard people like the movie, talk about the movie's problems, talk about the movie's box office returns. People like the book. I don't go out and look for reviews, and I've got a lot of filters on my social media. We should do a show on that someday.
Yes. You should.
Yeah. Got a lot of filters on social media, so if any rando wants to come in and tell me how much I suck for being a woman and writing in Star Wars, etc., I don't see it. But actually being able to talk to people who had read the book or had loved the movie and couldn't wait to read the book because they just bought the book, it was a different experience. It was really, really nice because it had been kind of weird being able to write the novelization of a Star Wars movie, but it be the Star Wars movie that people were saying didn't need to be written or filmed or whatever the hell they had to say about it. So many thoughts people had.
I'm sorry you have to deal with that.
That's all right.
It's been, I feel bad because it's been all gravy for me because I love Star Wars and I love Solo, and then I found out my best friend was writing the Solo novelization, so I've just been on cloud nine this whole year. You've had to deal with all the crap, though.
No, I haven't dealt with a lot of crap. Like I said, this is just me reading in general about the movie itself, which I can't control. But yeah, it was just nice. People were really into it and wanted to say things about different characters. And some person even said they didn't like L3 in the movie, but then when I expanded her story in the book, that they really, really like the character now, which meant a lot to me.
Perhaps this betrays my particular ethos, but I loved L3.
Yay! Me too.
That's what L3 stole the show, and I love what you did with the character in the book too.
Yeah, thank you.
L3 is my L3 is my favorite socialist robot.
Exactly. She really is.
I think L3 is
awesome.
everybody's favorite socialist droid, yeah.
Yeah. So, Elsa, how are things going with you?
I mean, they're good. You know, we've got the Fireside Quarterly going, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of magazine. And then I'm working on a novella right now, and I've got some stuff I need to work on. But nothing has really come. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. Disabled People Destroy is now out, and you can read Disabled People Destroy science fiction in its entirety. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that I did as the nonfiction editor. People really put their entire lives on the page and gave our readers a really great insight into what it's like to be disabled and reading science fiction. And I really encourage everybody to go pick it up because, yes, I'm biased, but also it's a really great issue.
Well, I wanted that's a good segue because the thing that made me want to bring you back on the show is we got a question from a listener. Admittedly, it was a while ago, and I'm sorry. But the question had to do with being a disabled person and being a writer. So I figured Matt and I are not qualified to answer that question. So let's bring back Elsa! Yay! So one thing we wanted to talk about was. So we recommend people go to conventions to network with editors and agents and other authors, but when you have a disability, that creates a different challenge. And so the question from the listener was, how do I, as a disabled person, deal with this? And so we wanted to bring you back to talk about that specifically, and then we'll talk about some other cool stuff.
Sure. I mean, the first thing that I have to say is that networking as a disabled person at conventions is challenging, not just because society doesn't really teach people how to socialize with disabled people, which I'll get into in a second, but there's also the financial cost. A lot of disabled people don't have the financial resources to go to every convention. And so I guess my first piece of advice is that if you're disabled, hello, puppy. If you're disabled and you want to go to conventions and you don't have the finances to go to all of them, which I totally get, pick one that is small and intimate. Don't pick like Worldcon as the convention that you go to, because you'll get a lot more out of a smaller convention where all of the writers are sort of hanging out at a single bar versus trying to hunt down the people you want to see. Because at least for me as a blind person, trying to find people I knew at Worldcon was a series of like horrifying errors. I'd walk into a bar, it would be dark, there would be tons of people in there, I wouldn't find anybody. I would walk out of the bar. I would go to a different bar. I would finally find somebody that I knew, and then they would suggest we go back to the other bar where all of our friends were. And I hate literally everything about being a blind person today.
Oh.
Like, I didn't even see Matt at Worldcon until the heroes.
Yeah.
So,
that's true. I mean, yeah, that's just true. Yeah, and that could be true of Worldcon. I think that's just good advice in general, honestly, because those things are so, unless you're going there for something specific, those things are nightmares to try to navigate. When you're able-bodied, I can't imagine trying to do it when you have, extra challenges.
Absolutely, but you add in like a wheelchair, for example.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And actually, one of my friends, Ace Radcliffe, did come to Worldcon with their wheelchair, and I mean, they couldn't get into certain places.
Right. Well, accessibility for cons is like a whole other. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. So I mean, like, one of the things that really frustrates me about sort of the old school conventions is the prevalence of room parties. And there's a lot of reasons for why room parties are challenging. But one of the biggest ones is I'm deaf. So I go to the SIFWA suite and it's basically a room full of noise. And I'm like, well, I can have a free drink and stare at all the people that I know, but I can't actually hear them. So all of this is to say that networking at conventions with a disability is really challenging. And some of the things that I've done to make that better is by really communicating with people about what I need. And, I'm at least lucky in that I have made a career out of yelling about accessibility. So people are more used to me doing that. Because if I walk up to somebody and say, hey, I would really like to chat, but I can't hear you in this bar, most people are going to be responsive because they know that if they aren't, I'll probably clip them in the ankle with my cane. But not everybody feels like they can do that. And not everybody feels like they can turn to an editor or an agent and say, hey, I'm disabled and I'd really like to talk to you. Can we make that happen in an environment that is more suitable to my needs than standing here in this hallway? And I think that that's something that we need to shift in our community. It's not just something because the onus is right now on the disabled person to say, I need help.
Yeah.
And what we should be doing is saying, how do we as a community shift things so that more disabled people can actually attend our events and participate in our community and feel like they're welcome? So I guess that's where I'd start, is with the fact that it's actually on all of the able-bodied listeners who work within the power structures of publishing to say, okay, well, there's a disabled author that I want to meet, or I feel like I want to be more open to things. You start booking events in only accessible places. You start asking questions. If you see that a restaurant has a single step up to the doorway, the response is not, it'll be fine, there aren't going to be any wheelchair users here. The response is, we have to find a different location.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it should be as. I mean, I was just thinking, in the way that harassment policies in the last few years have become much more of a prevalent thing, and cons feel like they have to address them. I feel like accessibility should be every bit the necessity that is, and should become part of the structure of planning a convention. And it just seems like so many of them don't have that step right now, just built into the process.
Yeah, I mean, some of them do, but also a lot of the accessibility policies aren't very clear. Your accessibility information should be on the landing page of your convention. It should not be hidden in the middle of a menu.
Right.
And also, it should not be an accessibility and anti-harassment statement. They should be two separate things.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I didn't mean they should be joined. I just meant in the way that was not always a priority for conventions, but is rapidly becoming one. Accessibility should also become one, yeah.
Let me be clear. I'm not saying that you said that, Matt. I'm saying that's something that I've seen.
Oh, I didn't. That was the thing.
So, speaking of advice to the able-bodied listeners, Elsa, so let's say you've got a fan or an agent or an editor who wants to approach you knowing that you are deaf-blind. How does one approach you to say, hey, what's up?
So I actually, every year, I put up a thread on my Twitter that is the how to approach Elsa in the wild.
Yes.
Because frankly, it's a little bit complicated. I ask people to tell me who they are, even if we've met before. Because I'm not face blind, I'm just blind. So I can't recognize you from your internet picture, no matter how much I talk to you on the internet.
Right.
The only person who I recognized at first contact was Sarah Gailey, but I recognized their voice from a block away. So they were yelling at me from a block away. I was like, oh, that's Gailey.
Oh, well, yeah. They're...
You tend to hear Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, don't expect that I will recognize you, and also don't expect that other blind people would recognize you. Don't get upset when I say, I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you, or can you remind me of your name because I can't read your badge. That's another big one. But if we're at a big event and you want to talk to me, approach me from the front, not from behind, because I can't hear you coming, and I'm blind on one side, so if you come up on me on that side, I'm more likely to drop you than I am to be friendly. It's happened before. I'm really sorry. Just really being honest about the fact that I can't recognize people has done me a lot of favors. There are still some people who don't want to do the things that I ask of them, but I try to be as open and honest about what I need from people. And that's how you approach me. You say, oh, hey, you're Elsa. I'm this person. We've interacted on the internet before, or maybe we haven't. Do you have some time to chat? Because usually people will just sort of pop up like a little prairie ferret creature from out of my peripheral vision and be like, hi, you're Elsa. And I'm like,
yes, I am.
yes,
And?
That is a statement of fact, yes.
I have 2 questions. Where did you come from and who are you? So does that answer that question?
I'd say so, yeah.
I think the point we could take away is don't be a prairie ferret creature.
Yes. Yes, prairie ferret creatures need not apply.
I also want to say when you're planning events that are celebratory events, maybe don't use strobes.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah, I forgot all about that.
Yeah, that's...
I was crying all over Myrrh at one point because I was completely overstimulated.
It's the wrong crowd for that in general, man. I don't. That's just such a bad choice on so many levels.
I know so many people who just get migraines from that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Many people with so many different issues that prescribe that kind of thing. It's just not a good idea. Plus, when were strobes ever a cool thing to begin with? I don't get that at all.
Middle school dance floors.
Yeah, but I hated middle school dances too, so I guess I'm just the wrong audience. But yeah, I think those are all really salient points, and it should not be a difficult thing to address if we just make it part of the structure of the thing. That's really the thing. Right? Just change our thinking a little bit. It's not that difficult.
Yeah.
Well, and like I said earlier, I feel like people aren't really taught how to socialize with disabled people because in the school system, we're often put in a different classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this separation that doesn't exist as adults, and I think it's really important if you have kids to make sure that they meet kids with disabilities, because you're not going to learn how to interact with disabled people unless if you start doing it.
Yeah. So one thing that's been on my mind a lot lately is self-rejecting. And I know that I'm bringing this up because you just did the editing on the nonfiction Disabled People Destroy. But I've been thinking about everything from I almost rejected my own novel that was nominated for a whole bunch of awards this year. People of color often self-reject. I've seen so many people contact FIA Literary Magazine on Twitter saying, I didn't have the courage to apply any of these places, but since I know you guys are run by Black people, I want to, submit to you. And I'm thinking, don't self-reject, please. And knowing what people have gone through, I respect where the fear comes from, but how do you approach this as an editor and as a writer?
Oh boy, that's a fun question. One of the things that I did when we were running the Disabled People Destroy Kickstarter was I wrote an essay called Disabled Enough, because we were getting questions every day, and mostly I was getting questions. For some reason, everybody decided I was the person to come to, but I was getting questions every day from people asking if their disability qualified for the issue, whether or not X disability or Y disability was, what we were looking for. And I finally was just like, look, it doesn't. We are not the mitigators of what's disabled. My job is to edit the essays. It is not to decide whether or not you are disabled enough for this issue. Here, let me just write a nice essay and put it out there for you to read. And that was really important because I think that it helped stop people from self-rejecting instantly, because there was already a built-in piece to our submissions guidelines that was, are you self-rejecting? Please read this essay.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a lot of work. I mean, I did a lot of emotional labor to make sure that people felt like they could submit to the issue, which was exhausting.
Can you explain a little bit more what kind of emotional labor you went through?
I was, every morning I would get to my desk, and the first thing that I would see was somebody asking me if they were disabled enough.
Okay.
Or if their specific disability counted toward being disabled. Or they would try to talk out their relationship with their disability with me on in my Twitter DMs, and that was a lot. It was a lot of work, and I was open to it because I knew it was important to reach out to my community and make sure that people felt like they were welcome. But I don't know that I would want to do that for another project because it was a lot.
Right. So what about, speaking as an author, what kind of advice can you give disabled people on self-rejecting if they're not having to judge whether they're disabled enough for that specific piece, that specific market, but deciding if they're good enough? I still struggle with that. I wrote a book that my agent is theoretically, at some point we're going to go out on submission with this thing. And I mean, it's a very blind forward book. It is written from a blind character's perspective. And I mean, I'm still struggling with whether or not editors are going to get this thing, whether readers are going to get it. I hope they do. I think I wrote it very well. But, I definitely, I worry that able-bodied people won't understand because able-bodied people often don't. So my self-rejection often comes from the form of, will able-bodied people get it? Because a lot of my writing either makes able-bodied people angry or it makes them confused. You're making them question their own beliefs and ways in the world, which for some reason these days makes everyone angry. Yeah, if you've read my Shape of Water essay that was up on Tor.com, if you just look at the comments for like 2 seconds, you'll understand what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
People's inability to cope with that kind of, with someone providing constructive and valid criticism of something they like, let alone love. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have online and social media, because people get they internalize that stuff so deeply and so poorly that they feel like it's an attack on them, when you go after that. And so much can be gained from those discussions. Like I loved your Shape of Water essay. I liked the Shape of Water, but like you absolutely made incredibly valid points about that were worth talking about. And our inability to have constructive discussions about these things without internalizing them is something that bothers me constantly.
Yeah.
I have a question also, because you're talking about, you worry that able-bodied people won't, understand or won't get it. Do you think you have to get to a place where you just go, you know what, I don't give a shit what able-bodied people think about this? Or do you have to, or is it something you actually have to take into consideration when you're working? Do you not have the ability to do that?
I think that we currently live in a society where the fact that my response is at this point, fuck it, I'm writing it anyway, is kind of an unpopular opinion.
Right.
But I also feel like that's the only way to write the art that I want to write.
Right.
So I think getting to that point is important, but I also think that I understand why there are disabled people out there who are equivocating to abled comfort, because I get that.
Absolutely. I think that's why because like my instinct is obviously be like, well, fuck them, I'm going to do what I want to do. But like I have the privilege to take that stance on most things. So I just didn't want to assume that that's the way to go, or that's the advice you want to give people. So I guess that's why I wanted to ask the question.
So, I mean, my advice is if you feel like you can afford to, fuck them. But if you are not ready to make that choice, and if you feel like you want to make sure that able-bodied people get it because you're trying to reach them, that's also fair.
Right.
But sometimes you just want to write something and not worry about whether able-bodied people get it or not. Am I right?
Yep, that's very true.
Because you're not doing a teaching. I mean, your writing is not going to be a teaching moment every single time. That's not your fucking job.
Right.
Because let's be honest, that's what people expect of me on the street. And that's a thing that I deal with in daily life. Like, people will come up to me and ask me what's wrong with my eye, and I don't know them.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, disabled people have this experience where our bodies seem to be public commodities. So people will come up to us and just be like, can I touch your chair? What's wrong with your eye? Why can't I pet your guide dog? Like, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like we are basically walking, talking, show and tell people sometimes, or at least that's how people want to look at us. And I think that somewhat comes from the culture of freak shows, because there was a time period where disabled people were physically put on display as part of entertainment. So the more that I work in this industry, the less that I want my work to feel like it's a freak show artifact.
Yeah, that's fair. I had another question. Crap.
Write them down.
Oh, I know. But it occurred to me. It occurred to me as we were talking, is my point. So if the answer is fuck it and just write the damn thing because it needs to be written because you need to write it and you're not doing a teaching thing for able-bodied people, would you recommend self-publishing, or would you recommend still submitting to all of the usual larger markets, or where do you go from there? Keep submitting,
because we ultimately need this stuff to be out there, and the only way that we change the culture is by making people look at it. So, I mean, submit to Fireside. I would love to see more disability stuff in our slush pile. We want more disability work in our magazine. I really encourage disabled people of color to submit to FIA, because we do not have enough work from disabled people of color. And I want to put it this way. There is literally a hashtag on Twitter called disability2white. Because the main focus of sort of disability activism is on white people, and that needs to change.
Yeah. Matt, do you have any more questions?
No, I feel like we covered some very good ground, and I want to get to the Me Before You thing, because I'm really curious about what the hell that is, or whatever that is.
Yeah, so this is something that came up before we started recording. I was telling Elsa how I thought it was interesting that right after we made the Twitter announcement that she was going to be on the show today, two things caught my eye, which is one thing was a blind run game company for blind people was announcing itself and talking about a tool that it's putting out so blind people can make their own games, which I thought was awesome. And I'm gonna have to look up what the name of the company in a moment. But and then also author was talking about his Me Before You essay that came up on Chuck Wendig's blog Terrible Minds a couple of years ago that's been referenced several times in various classes and stuff. And Elsa said she had comments about Me Before You, and then Matt said he didn't know what it was, so we decided to save it all for you, listener. Matt's learning moment and Elsa's opinion. So Elsa, do you want to tell Matt what Me Before You is?
Okay, so Me Before You is a book by I'm gonna have to look up her name, hang on.
Jody something?
Yeah, it's but I don't want to get the name wrong because I'm about to make a lot of angry noises. Okay. Jojo Moyes.
Jojo, right.
Right. So this book is the story of how a man who became a quadriplegic needs somebody to come and take care of him and cheer him up. And so a quirky young lady who does not have any kind of medical training is hired to be his assistant type person.
They made a movie out of that, didn't they? No.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I remember that trailer. That was not a good trailer. All right. Okay.
Right. So basically, woman falls in love with man. Man has lots of money. They do not have sex because, according to this book, disabled people don't do that. And then he dies and leaves her all the money.
Oh my God. Is that the point of that story?
Yes.
Doesn't he go to Switzerland for euthanization?
Yep.
Yeah, so he kills himself.
God.
Yeah.
He kills himself in Switzerland and then leaves her all of his money because, that's what rich disabled people do, apparently. Apparently there are rich disabled people. I didn't know.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems with this book.
There's a lot to unpack there, just in that very brief description. A lot to unpack. Wow. I didn't realize it went that deep.
It's funny. I knew most of those horrifying things, but I didn't know she had no medical training, and for some reason that's another thing.
Right. No, because I watched this movie. There was the movie selection on a flight from Sweden to New York was Me Before You, Birth of a Nation, Batman versus Superman. It was bad. It was bleak. It was bleak movie selection. And I tried to watch Batman versus Superman because I thought that would be the least possible, the least terrible thing, and I couldn't do it.
No. So Batman versus Superman is never the least terrible thing, sadly.
I put on Me Before You, and I just the flight attendant brought me some whiskey because it was a long flight, so I was drinking. And my poor seatmate, because we had a seat in between them, was very lucky. But she kept looking over at me because I think that I was actually making tiny snarling noises out loud. Because she shows up in cute, quirky outfits and tries to take him outside. And it's like, what? Why? No. Why?
Oh, God.
I'm sorry, Quirky Outfits?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She's like the super cute girl.
Right. Is she like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope mixed in with the rest of these horrible things, or?
Yes.
The Manic Pixie Dream Girl, but she doesn't leave. The guy does.
Right. Well, he kills himself, apparently, so that's, yeah.
He kills himself, and then she gets to get back with her boyfriend, who is terrible. That's the other thing.
Oh, for real? Wow.
Lovely.
Oh, wow. The layers. It's like a lasagna or casserole of terribleness.
Yes, it is. So, the thing about this movie is that it's actually reinforcing a lot of really horrible things. Like, one, it's reinforcing the idea that nobody loves disabled people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's reinforcing the idea that disabled people don't have sex or romantic entanglements or anything like that. It's reinforcing the idea that all disabled people want to die, which is super helpful. It's reinforcing the idea that it also, I feel, does actually kind of reinforce this nonsense that women are stupid, which isn't great either. It also reinforces the fact that all disabled people are tragic stories.
Right.
No. So it's like there's multiple reasons why I hate that movie and that book. And, I have to admit, an able-bodied person wrote this, and this is what their ideal of a disabled story was like.
I was going to ask.
She didn't.
I don't know JoJo Boys, just what you're saying. I naturally assume that she is not herself disabled, because I just can't believe. Yeah. Wow. Sorry.
And she didn't interview anybody either.
I have no idea.
No, her son is deaf, and I think she has a friend with a debilitating chronic condition, but didn't actually talk to any paraplegic or quadriplegic people. Yeah.
Like I said on this show last time, sensitivity editors are great.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's by the way, if you have not listened to that previous episode, Elsa is available, aren't you? Are you still doing sensitivity reading?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I have 2 books on my desk right now.
Excellent. So if you need a sensitivity read, you can talk to Elsa if you've got deaf or blind characters, or do you go beyond that, or?
I do deaf and blind. I do LGBT rep because I'm a queer woman, and I do not do Orthodox Jewish characters. But if you're looking for somebody to do a sensitivity read on a character who's converting to Judaism, I'm your girl.
All right.
And you will have to pay Elsa, because you have to pay your sensitivity editors.
Correct.
I just want to make that very
well,
clear.
Yes.
If you haven't heard the last episode, and there should be a link to the last episode in the show description, we should do that, so
yes.
people can go back and check that out.
Definitely.
But I feel that's always important, because too many people still just naturally assume that it's something that you're doing for altruistic reasons, and that it's somehow your duty to provide the service for able-bodied people.
And the other thing is, I don't do sensitivity reads for short fiction because I edit a short fiction magazine.
Right.
As we said in the last show, many hats, many feathers.
Yep. I like how you remembered that.
Oh no, that's become a running thing on the show. We reference the many hats constantly. Just because I like picturing her in different hats, it amuses me.
I like hats. I used to wear them all the time.
I know, and it always amused me. I'm not saying you don't wear them well, but you do. You wear them well, but still, it's just I picture funny hats in my head.
You had such a good chicken hat at the losers' party, Mer.
I did.
I am still upset about that. They gave her. She looked awesome in every hat they gave her at that party. I had like the pom pom on my head.
You looked good in it, though.
I mean, I styled it because it's just I commit. I will say that about myself. But I was just mad because like they gave you the chicken hat, and then they gave you like the Columbia from Rocky Horror Picture Show hat. It's like every hat they gave you, you just look progressively cooler than the last hat. And I'm stuck with the Flopsy the Clown crap on my head.
I saw Mer in the chicken hat, and my friend who was my guide human for the evening was like, "Did Mer bring that specifically to wear with the hat?"
I mean, it's a fair question. That is something you would do, Mark. You would bring a chicken hat.
I would not bring a chicken hat to a party. I know how those parties are run, so I knew that there would be hats provided.
Well, you would bring a chicken hat to a party in which you knew hats were not going to be provided, was my point.
Oh, well, I don't do that to parties now. Should I?
I think it should be a thing. I think the chicken hat should be a thing. It should be one of your trademarks.
All right. I can do that. You know, there was somebody was really, really pushing me to steal the chicken hat. It was the end of the night. Nobody was actually coming up to me and go, "All right, Ms. Lafferty, you need to give the chicken hat back." And I just couldn't do it.
You just couldn't keep the chicken hat? You didn't feel right about it?
I'm not good with stealing. Oh, come on. It's not.
You didn't keep the chicken hat?
No, it wasn't mine.
I'm very indignant about this.
It was George's chicken hat.
Listen, George R.R. Martin, if you're listening to this, give Mer the chicken hat.
George, you owe Mer a chicken hat. I'll just say it. I love that. That is so like a roadside business you'd see off the freeway in the South somewhere. George's chicken hats.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, if the whole writing and TV production thing doesn't work out for him, he can start selling chicken hats by the side of the road.
He should do that anyway, I feel. He's got the capital. I do it as just like a side project.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like George's Chicken Hats sells both chicken hats and fried chicken.
Yeah, I wanted to find a tie-in there, but I couldn't think of a clever way to do it. But I absolutely agree, Elsa. Fried chicken should be involved in some capacity. Mm-hmm. In fact, really, the hats are just an entry point for George to get you to buy his chicken.
Are there live chickens being sold at this place, too?
That would be, I don't know. Maybe it's pets. Maybe it's not even about fried chicken. Maybe it's just about chickens themselves. Maybe he's just trying to find homes for chickens. Like it's a totally philanthropic pursuit.
I don't think I want a real chicken on my head.
I mean, they're not to put on your head.
No, the chicken hats are for on your head. The live chickens are not.
No. No matter how many times you've seen Labyrinth, it's not good to put live birds on top of your head. Because they had the puppet with the live. It doesn't matter. Like I said, we've taken this entirely too far.
This has gone completely off the rails.
I don't even know what's happening.
So, do we... well, thank you also for explaining the Me Before You thing. I kind of wish I didn't know about that, but I guess I did. Do we have anything else to say about that? Because we actually have a lot of questions.
We do? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, we do. So should we...
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Don't write stories about disabled people killing themselves for over nothing, and your disabled character should be having sex. Enough said.
I think those are also, again, good points all around. So should I go to the Twitters here, Mer?
Go to the Twitters.
I will go to the Twitters. And this is a question that I believe only you will be able to answer, Mer, because you're special.
Okay.
Aaron Rath asks, what goes into writing a movie novelization that's different from the normal novel writing process?
Well, you get a script, and you don't get to keep it if it's Lucasfilm. I don't know what other movies do, but you're writing somebody else's story, and you have the challenge of trying to make it fresh and interesting while still not deviating from the story. And then you are allowed is the wrong word, because you're supposed to expand on it. That's part of the awesomeness, which you get to do scenes that did not appear in the movie, but of course they need to be approved by the film studio. So it's not as intricate as outlining, but I wrote several just lines like, I wanted to expand L3's spoiler alert on Solo, L3's uploading into the Falcon. I wanted to expand that scene, so I said that. I said I thought Val needed more characterization, so I wanted to expand her death scene to allow her to do a little bit of, not quite life flashing before her eyes, but in sort of coming to terms with her coming death and thinking about some things in her past.
So you literally had to compile a list of things you wanted to do and then submit that list for approval?
Yes.
Right. That's what I was wondering. Very cool.
Yeah, and then, but it beyond that, it was pretty hands off. When they approved, they said which scenes they wanted to approve. I got yelled at by Justina Ireland I had the publisher's permission to do this, so I was going to do it, but Justina Ireland yelled at me in front of a room of like 350 people that I should not do it. So I'll just say that I wanted to put a different epilogue on the book, and I really didn't think they would go for it because I thought it was a little big for my britches move, and they did. And I was just so excited. So, like someone was saying, the only thing wrong is this scene wasn't in the movie. I'm like, that's because I wrote it, not the script writers. So, anyway, the end of Solo has an epilogue that was not in the movie and involves Enfys Nest, and I was very proud of it, but I could not believe they approved that. So, then I wrote the thing, and then it went through one edit with my Del Rey editor, and then it went to Lucasfilm for their comments, and that's pretty much what it went into it.
So you had a pretty painless experience, all things considered.
It was pretty painless, except they took a while to approve my extra scenes, so they gave me more time, which the good part was I got to see the movie before I turned in the book. It was
that's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they took away that time from the editing process, so both edits were very fast turnarounds, which was very stressful.
I'm sure.
But you rose to the challenge, as you always do.
Yes, and I'm still glad I got to see the movie, so
So they gave, just very quickly, because I was wondering why you talking, they gave you the script. Did they give you any guidelines to start out with, or was it only after you submitted your list of these are the things I wanted to do that you got that kind of feedback?
The second one. Yeah, they didn't give me any guidelines of saying, one person said that they were going to cut the scene with Han and Kira in the vat of eels as they were running away from the white worms, and, they would like it if I kept it in, but it felt more like a fan telling another fan, oh, it'd be cool if you did this, instead of, we would like you to keep this scene in the book. So
Sure.
I think that's the only thing I remember them saying needed to be added on.
Well, if there's one Hollywood rule that's always been true, it's they always cut the scene with the vat of eels.
I know.
Very cool. I think that's actually a really insightful glimpse into that process. Do you have anything to add to that, or shall I move on?
We can move on.
And Elsa, I haven't done a movie novelization. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
I have not, although I'd really love it if somebody would let me write Daredevil.
Yes, God, please.
I was hoping we would work that in, because that's become tradition. And I agree. Elsa should write Daredevil in some large capacity. Okay, so Rhonda Taylor asks, any favorite short story markets for first writes or reprints, which is a good question.
I mean, Fireside? I work at Fireside.
Yeah.
And does Fireside take reprints?
We don't take reprints. We do original. The only place that I know of that does reprints, and this is probably because I've never published a reprint, is Podcastle and all the escape artist places.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because that was going to be my first note. That's a great place for your reprints. The Escape Artist family of podcasts.
I would agree with that.
Which are all... Mur has some experience with that. She may have even been nominated for an award for her work with one of those podcasts.
Yes, Escape Pod does like reprints.
And what have you got? You got 4 or 5 markets currently, right?
Podcastle for fantasy, Pseudopod for horror, and Cast of Wonders for YA.
So covering the gamut, all pro markets, great people, great product. I can't recommend Escape Artist markets enough. So that would definitely be my top pick for reprints.
Yep.
What else do we have here? Jared Kelsey, and he used the hashtag, which I always appreciate. He used the district as hashtag. I have submitted a short fiction work to several markets, and the editors all have suggested different ways to change the story. Should I keep submitting until I find a market for the story, or write several different variations? That is actually an interesting question, and one we have not gotten before.
Yeah. I would not say to rewrite it several times. That is a waste of your time.
No, definitely.
Especially since the people who say that give the advice and don't actively ask for a resubmission, you don't, if you're getting something different from every editor, then I think, this is hard, but I think you might have a larger problem that you need to go in there with a fine-tooth comb and find. Because sometimes people say they don't like one thing when really the problem is with something else, but it's hard to articulate. Now, if there's editors doing this, that makes it even more difficult.
Yeah.
But I'd say find your favorite, find the one that you think, oh, that's a good idea. I didn't even see that problem with my story. And see if editing it like that gets you any more traction. But I wouldn't do them all.
Yeah, especially since, again, you're not going to be resubmitting to that market unless if they specifically asked you to. So you can't write to please one specific editor because they're not going to see it again. The best thing that you can do is if all of those editors are giving you feedback that looks like it might be complimentary, then you can sort of say, okay, well, if I do these things together, maybe that will make the story better. But I think really what you're in for is a fine-tooth comb edit of your story to see what's going on in there that's not working for everyone, which sucks, but I've been there.
Or it's possible you have one of those stories that a lot of beginning writers would kill to have, and yet you want to kill not to have, which is, it's almost good enough, but not quite. And really, maybe you should just trunk it and start over with something new and use the experience you've gotten in writing that story to write something better. There's complete silence here. Do you guys agree with that, or is that bad advice?
You know, it was just such heavy knowledge, like I couldn't hear over the thud that it made when it hit the ground. Just, we're dropping such. No, I just agree. I feel like it's that covers the question as asked.
Okay.
Okay, so we got this one a while back, but I liked this question and I wanted to talk about it. So this is from Simeon, and he asks, I'm wondering how you feel about queerness as a normalized state that's prevalent but not actually a focus of the story. Does this have room in mainstream SF or even fantasy? And I like that question because I'm a huge believer in it doesn't have to be the focus of the story, and you should populate your worlds with as many diverse characters as there are in the actual world.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And just speaking for myself, like, and this is something I've talked about on Twitter before, I'm very aware that, like, there are narratives and stories that are not mine to tell, you know? Like, the whole stay in your lane thing. I'm very aware of that. But I also really want to populate the worlds I create as diverse as the real world is. So I see a very clear distinction between I'm taking someone's story away and I'm telling it when it's not my story to tell, and populating the world of my story with diverse people. And I think, like, the latter is okay to do and should be the focus of it, you know, and that's what I try to do. I try to fill my worlds with as many queer people and, you know, people of color as possible without taking their stories away from them.
Yeah.
Add disabled people to that list.
Of course, disabled people. Yeah, no, there's one of the characters in my new epic fantasy absolutely is disabled, and I'm trying to get more into that. But again, not trying to take the story away.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I articulate that for disability is you don't want to be telling a disabled narrative, because a disabled narrative is, that's for a disabled person to tell, but you can tell a story with disabled people in it.
Yeah.
Because, like, a disabled narrative would be a story that is about what it's like to have a disability.
Right.
Or, you know, learning how to cope with a disability, I think, is actually a disabled narrative. And I see a lot of able-bodied people doing that, where they're like, this is what it's like to be deaf for the first time. It's like, well, if you've never actually gone through that, you probably don't want to go down that path. But yeah, I think it's important to be diverse in the worlds that you create. And queerness is also kind of a great place to start with that, because anybody can be queer.
Yeah.
Can just come up randomly, and it doesn't have to be a thing.
Yeah. In the TV show The Good Place, Eleanor is the main character is bisexual. We have never seen her go out with a woman, but the things she has said just off the cuff flippantly about her attraction to women or being into hooking up with another woman on the show, and it not being pause, let's hear what she just said, oh my god, but she's just, I mean, they more looked surprised because that was not where the conversation was going to be going in the first place. And, you know, she's bisexual, they've confirmed it, which is important, but, you know, it was already very clear, and it's not a Eleanor's going to go date a woman thing. It's, you know, she's a character in this world falling in love with a guy, as lots of bisexual people do. And it's taking it from queerness or disability, which I do not have firsthand experience with, but to women, I see a lot of beginning stories by guys who you can tell they want to put women in their stories, so they make like one or two of the main like ensemble cast women, but then the entire background, the world behind them, populated by palace guards or shopkeepers or just people in a crowd, are all dudes, unless it's like a job that's traditionally done by a woman. And it's like, so it's great to think I need a female character in my story, but you got to think beyond that and think there are going to be people in the background that are also not like me and remember that. One of my favorite examples also of queerness in a story is N.K. Jemisin's The Broken Earth series, where there's a character who's trans, and it's brought up only when you see her getting undressed and washing, and the main character is mildly surprised to see a penis, but she doesn't care, and then Tonki is still a female, a woman the whole way through, but we know she's trans, and it's like, there's no big deal. Tonki does get into a relationship with somebody later on, and surprise, surprise, we don't hear anything about their sex lives because it's not important to the story and it's not our business. So many people want to hear about how trans people have sex. None of your fucking business is how. Yep. And, that's a really good example of, you've got a queer person in a story who's very clearly queer, and it's not, her queerness has nothing to do with the actual story. She's just a queer character.
It's just allowed to exist the way heterosexuality exists in, 99% of the stories up until this point. It doesn't need to be talked about because everybody understands it in context. Like, we need to make queer. Sorry, Oscar.
No. I'm going to follow up with, what we were talking earlier about Me Before You and about how disabled characters should be having sex. I hear a lot of able-bodied people going, but how? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's not your business.
Yeah. If a disabled person wants to write that narrative, great. If you want to, you can have sex with a disabled person, not to find out, but those are the people who need to wonder.
Don't become a devotee just to do research for your story.
Yeah.
But I would add, and I mean, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, you can also have disabled characters who are sexual people in your story without having explicit sex scenes or going into the inner workings of it.
That's exactly, yeah.
That's really the point, is just to let it exist. Just let it be its thing, like you would all the quote-unquote, normal stuff, which is, what the hell is normal?
Yeah, it's like, if you've got a straight couple in a story and they've got a kid, do you really need to show them fucking to make that kid?
You
don't.
You don't have to explain. We all take it as read how the kid got there. Like, we get it. Just let it be its own thing.
Just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone.
Very cool. But I like, so is there anything else to add to that, or shall we, because we're coming up on time here. I think we have one more back question that I wanted to get to. It's from Heather Rose Walter. It's specifically aimed at me, but of course it's open to the floor. So Matt, do you find your book publishing career helps your pursuits in screenwriting? I know many folks who pursue screenwriting exclusively, but I would think other writing experience would be an advantage. What do you think? I absolutely find that publishing and writing fiction has helped me in my screenwriting pursuits. I wouldn't have never started a career as a screenwriter if I didn't write fiction. I got into it by having one of my short stories optioned for film, and I got the opportunity to adapt it into the screenplay, and then I used that screenplay to get more work as a screenwriter. And I'm still, shopping that model around. I'm trying to take the things I write in book form and adapt them to film for the market, and I find that gives you an in. It gives you something more substantial to talk about than I have a script or I have an idea for something. And I absolutely encourage people to do the hybrid thing. Plus, books, as exclusive as an industry as it still is, it's much easier to access than film and television is. So it gives you a place to start professionally that you can actually find inroads into on your own if you're fortunate enough. But yeah, I absolutely think it does. Is there anything that
I worked in theater and playwriting and dramaturgy before I came to fiction writing, and I think it helped me do the job that I do now. But I'm not really active in it at this point, so it doesn't necessarily help my career at this point.
Right. But you have that feather in your many hats.
I do, and also, dramaturgy probably helps me the most because it is basically the career of people who like to research things and make worlds out of it.
No, that's what we do. That's perfect. That's perfect foundation.
I do want to say, not necessarily to contradict the two of you, but to point out that sometimes people who are not doing well in their chosen medium think, oh, I'm going to switch to another one because that one's easier. It happens a lot with comics. A lot of people think that that comics must be easier, so they're going to switch from writing a novel to go to comics, or any sort of storytelling medium. And for one, you're insulting a lot of people who work very hard in that medium, but also it's not, yes, the different backgrounds will help you, especially, it's all teaching you narrative, but you have to respect that movies tell stories in a different way than books tell stories, and they do it in a different way than comics, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, no, absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all. And that's also, to delineate like my answer, I'm specifically speaking from a business side of things. I'm not talking about the craft side of things.
Sure.
The craft side of things is a whole different ball of wax. And whatever industry you do, like, you have to do the work. You have to understand the specific craft of that medium to be successful in it. But just taking as read that you are willing to do that work and that, you have the capacity to do it and you understand it, from a business perspective, having your foot in both of these things can be very beneficial. But I absolutely agree with that point.
Yeah.
None of this is easy. I mean, I feel like the preface of this show is, look, none of this shit is easy. Like, anytime you try to make money as a writer, it is not easy.
Yeah.
And writing well is not easy. So I think we go from that. We springboard off that into anything we talk about. But I absolutely agree. I don't think that's contradictory at all.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Heather, there you go. I think that's all the Twitter questions I had on the back burner, and I feel like we're kind of pressing time as it is. So
yeah, we need to do an email focused show because they're
yeah. But for the time being, I think we've covered some good ground, I feel like.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. Elsa, is there anything you want to talk about that we have not broached?
I don't think so. I think we're good. I mean, you asked a lot of good questions, and I hopefully answered them to your satisfaction.
Yeah, it's always awesome to have you on the show, and thank you for being... Thank you for doing what you do, because, as you said, being an activist is a lot of emotional labor. Sensitivity reading is a lot of emotional labor, and it's hard. And we appreciate you being willing to come on the show and talk about the things that you hope we will learn, so we will not make us bother any other disabled person with either faux pas or unwanted questions. So thank you for doing that lifting. It really is very useful.
Well, thanks for having me back.
What you want to give us the URLs that you're associated with?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Snarkbat, SNARKBAT. You can find my sort of upcoming CV stuff on feministsonar.com/Elsa. And if you're in the Chicago area, you can come and see me speak at the University of Chicago as part of Ada Palmer and Cory Doctorow's censorship series this fall.
Oh, excellent.
I'll be there on November 16th.
Oh, man, I want to go to that.
That is really cool. And just to reiterate, Elsa is available to write Daredevil fiction in any medium you'd like to.
That's right.
Yeah, something people don't know about me is that my background, my professional background, was initially as a historian, and I did a lot of work on gender and censorship. So that's what I'm doing at the University of Chicago.
Well, that is fantastic. That's going to be a barn burner, as they say. Mur, do you want to do the obligatory end of show shilling?
I'll obligatory shill. You can see the blog and show notes at merverse.com, and you can see all of my projects there, including my other podcast, I Should Be Writing, my books, the many award-nominated Six Wakes, the novelization of Solo, a Star Wars story, and the nonfiction book that goes along with my other podcast called I Should Be Writing. And I'm also the co-editor of the Hugo Award-nominated magazine Escape Pod, and you can see that at escapepod.org. And I think that's everything. There's probably more, but many hats and feathers.
So many hats and so many feathers, yes. All of those things. You can find me on Twitter at Matt FN Wallace, my website, matt-wallace.com, and my YouTube channel, Angry Writer. It's a thing I do. And I also want to mention that the final course, the omnibus of my last 4 Cindy Jour books, is coming out in a couple of weeks here. It's up for pre-order on Amazon. Get you all 4 books for the Kindle at a greatly reduced price if you were to buy them individually, and I encourage everyone to go pre-order that. And if you haven't gotten into the series, go back and read it, damn it. Start with Envy of Angels, the first book, and read the whole thing.
Because it's awesome.
You can binge read it right now. Binge it. I encourage binging.
But you might have some nightmares about chicken nuggets.
You might. It might ruin chicken nuggets for you, or it might make you hungry for chicken nuggets. I get both. People are weird, you know? But either way, it's a good time. It's a good ride, I've been told.
We've used 3 food metaphors this entire podcast, and 2 of them were negative, and it's still making me want all the food that we've mentioned.
It's so weird how that happens. That's why I put it in the story. In the story, after all the horrible things happen with the food, they go out and get the food that the horrible things happen with, because that's how we are. You know? Yeah. You watch Super Size Me and you go, oh, that's disgusting. Oh, but I kind of want French fries.
That's right.
There's something in us. It's the darker angels of our nature.
Exactly.
Reverse psychology. It works on everyone.
Yeah. It does. It really does. Murray, you want to bring it home?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Elsa. And I'll see you next time, Matt. You can support us at patreon.com/mightymur.
Ditch Diggers!
Theme song by Devo Spice. DevoSpice.com.